Hello everyone, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yippee for Yana episode. All supplies I'm using for this project are listed and linked in the video description below. In this video, I'm creating a Just Because card. The sentiment on my card reads, "Hello beautiful, I wish you were my neighbor." This is the kind of card that you can create and send to anyone who you wish would live closer to you. We all have crafty friends scattered all over the world. We all wish we would have a crafty friend next door. So I feel like that's a great card design to create to your crafty bestie who lives miles away. I'm using several products for my project today, and I'm creating with a stunning European street buildings stamp set. It's this stamp set right here. There's also a set of coordinating dies. You have 3 large houses in this stamp set, and these are layering. So you can use different colors of ink to create multicolor houses. I love how large the houses are in this set, and I also love how everything is labeled. So you have A, B, C for each type of house, layer A, layer B, and layer C. And then you also have 2 sentiments in this stamp set. One reads, "Home is where you are," and the other sentiment, I am using this one for my card, reads, "I wish you were my neighbor." The next stamp set I am using is a fabulous European street background set, and this one features 2 backgrounds that you can use to complement your houses. I love this stamp set though because one part is the confetti, which I use to create sky. But you can also use for some snow for winter cards, or even if you want to stamp a blooming field of flowers. Imagine stamping those tiny dots in different shades of pink and yellow and purple, all of those flowery colors. There's also a stamp to create a brick wall or maybe cobblestone, like a cobblestone road for your houses. And then you also have some clouds. Now the clouds have a coordinating die, so you can cut those out and, add onto your pretty little scene. Now, the last stamp set that I am using from this collection is the European Street Add-ons set. And oh goodness, this is brilliant. And I will say that this is a must-have because if you do plan to get the European Street buildings, the stamp set with the houses, I do recommend that you also get this layering, this add-on set, because you'll be able to add so many different fun elements onto your houses. On the back, you can see a cute little example of all of the images used together. So you can add a little bicycle, you can add little trees, you can add fence, you can add a bunch of different things. So let's go ahead and get started and stamp some of those pretty houses. Now, by the way, when you first get these stamps, it is best to prep them. They're brand new. They have some of that film from the manufacturing process on them. So it's best to prep them. And I like to prep them by simply using a pencil eraser and rubbing a pencil eraser across my stamp. Now, I have already used these stamps, so I don't really need to prep them, but I still wanted to show that because we tend to forget to do this. I know I tend to forget to do this, but if you do this, you will get a much better stamped result. So I'm just going to close the lid of my MISTI and I'm stamping onto Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I'm using new colors of ink from Simons Says Stamp, and here I have butter. It's a very pretty yellow. I always love yellow colors, and I'm just going to go ahead and stamp this onto my panel. I used my stamp chamois, cleaned my stamp, and it's time to stamp the second house. I'm not stamping the second layer right away because I want to give the ink time to dry before I add the second layer. If you stamp the second layer right away and your first layer ink is still damp, is still wet, the second layer will sort of bleed a little bit and you won't have that crisp image. So I always prefer to let the ink dry. I always like to give it time to dry before I stamp any additional images, any additional layers on top of it. For my second house, I'm using Aspen. This is a very pretty sagey green color. I kind of wanted to have this yellow and sage green color combination on my card. And by the way, with these houses, you have so many different options. You can stamp these in so many different colors of ink. You can experiment with different ink colors for the different layers. And you know, guys, just have fun. It is a beautiful set. The layers are not hard to align. By the way, I've already aligned the second layer on my yellow house. And for the second layer, I'm using the darker yellow. This is honey color. It's very beautiful, very vibrant yellow, true honey color. And I'm just adding that second layer onto my card. Grab the second layer for my second house and stamp that using sage color. It's another very pretty green, a slightly darker green than the one I used for the background layer. This is easy to align. The windows layer just fills the empty space there, so it's not that hard. And the second layer is done. Now for the third layer, I am going to bring a little bit of the darker color. I want to create some contrast, not too much contrast. I'm not going to use black, but I do want to have a little bit of contrast. And I figured that yellow would look really pretty with a sort of brown green color. So I'm using WOODSY ink pad for this. I love how dark brown this is. And I'm just stamping that to outline the windows, outline the front door and the awning above the door. And I love it. Now for the third layer for my greenhouse, I'm also going to use a brown ink and just stamping that. And you can see how beautiful this looks. You can definitely go with a light, medium, and dark. For example, a light medium, a light green, a medium green, and a dark green. But I feel like using a brown, a dark brown color just gives me a lot more contrast. And now I'm also using my add-on little stamp set, and I'm adding a little bit of greenery onto the greenhouse. I'm not adding any greenery onto the yellow house because if I mix green and yellow, I'm going to end up with teal or blue, and that's not the color I want to have on my house. So I'm skipping adding any sort of greenery onto the yellow house, but I am stamping the little vine onto the green one using Perfection ink color. Now, the little stamp that I'm using, it's actually a part of a 3-step layering vine, but I don't want to do the other steps. I don't want to have the other layers. So I'm just using this one single individual layer on my house, and I think that that looks just as good. There are coordinating dies available for these houses, and I'm using mine to cut these out in my Platinum 6 die cutting and embossing machine. I'm just using a little bit of best ever craft tape from Spellbinders to tape these in place to make sure that my dies won't move and cut the houses as needed. There are 3 houses in this stamp set, but like I said, I'm only using 2 houses because I can only fit 2 on the design, on the card idea that I have in mind. Okay, next, I want to stamp some additional images from the add-on stamp set, and I actually want to do some die cutting first. So there are coordinating dies available for the add-ons, but they're super small and super tiny. So I figured it would be best if I first cut the images out, created a template for myself, and then use that template and stamp onto them. You can, of course, stamp your images onto the paper and then align your dies over the stamped images and cut them out. But these are very tiny, these are very small. I also did not want to cut my dies apart because again, they're small. I did not want to risk losing the dies on my desk in my craft room because let's be honest, we lose little detailed dies like this all the time. So I made sure to keep them all connected and instead I used them as one die. Here you can see that I created a little template for myself and I'm now using that template to stamp the images. It's a little bit tricky because images are brand new and they're trying to stick to my fingers and I'm having a little bit of a hard time positioning them exactly in those open areas, exactly in centering them over the die cut pieces. But in the end, I succeed and I get all of these beautiful images stamped. So I have a little bicycle and I stamped that using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. So I am using a little bit of black on this card, and I also will use the black to stamp my sentiment. And another sentiment will be heat embossed on the black cardstock. So some black is going to be present on this project. I'm also stamping trees, and for the trees, I'm using brown and then stamping the green part of the tree using Perfection. So with the stamping done, I then place the coordinating dies over my stamped images. As you can see, it's very easy to align them. I used a piece of yellow tape and I cut them out in my Platinum 6 die cutting and embossing machine. And here's a look at these tiny little pieces. They're going to go so well together with my stamped houses. So you can use these to complement your little scenes, add a little park next to your houses and so on. Okay, let's work on the background. I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending, very subtle ink blending, and very, I would say, purposeful ink blending. So I'm first using the Seafoam ink in the Simon Says Stamp blending brush, and I'm applying this ink to the top right-hand side corner. This is going to signify sky. Now, I don't want to ink blend the entire panel. I just want to add a hint of color into this corner. Next, I also have celery ink and another brush from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to blend this green ink, this is the lightest green in my stash, onto the bottom right-hand side corner. I'm not blending these colors together. They will meet in the center, but I'm not overlapping them. I'm just bringing a little bit of this green from the bottom, and this is going to signify grass. So that's the look at my ink blended background. You can see it's very simple. No ink blending on the left-hand side because that's where I will have my sentiment, and I don't want the ink blending to go over the sentiment. With the blending done, I'm bringing my larger MISTI, and here I have one of the backgrounds. I have the stamp with the dots. I'm going to use the dots and stamp them in the same Seafoam ink to create sky. And I'm going to stamp these twice. So I will do one impression using the Seafoam ink. I'm just repositioning the stamp to make sure I don't have any air bubbles, because if you do have air bubbles, the stamp might pick up additional ink and you might end up with some smudges on your paper. So just make sure there are no air bubbles. I'm cleaning my stamp and then I'm repositioning it on my panel. I've actually rotated it to give me a different section of the stamp, and I'm going to stamp it again onto the panel. And I'm mostly focusing in that top right-hand side corner. Notice that I'm also not inking the entire stamp. I'm just inking up a section because that's what I want to have on my card. I just want to have a section stamped with these dots. And I love the way this looks. So I have my subtle sky, I have my subtle grass, and now it's time to stamp our sentiment. I absolutely love the Simon Says Stamp SLIMLINE Beautiful You stamp set. It includes several sentiments, several stamps with a large beautiful. I love how large it is. It is meant for a slimline card, but I love to use it on my A2 cards, and I just use this sentiment by stamping it vertically on my card. It adds a lot of interest. It's kind of unexpected. But, I just love the way this looks on an A2 card. I love that it's rotated. It's not stamped the usual way. Now, with all of the parts and pieces created, I can go ahead and assemble my card. So I use the Simon Says Stamp Sea Glass cardstock to create an A2 side folding card base for my project. I trimmed my stamped panel down slightly and I adhered it onto my card base. You can't really see this, but I added scrap panels of cardstock between my ink blended panel and my card base to create a little bit of dimension. So the ink blended panel is popped on my card base slightly. Now, I also die cut 2 blank houses from white cardstock, and I'm going to use those to add sturdiness to my stamped pieces because they warped a little bit. I added a ton of ink, which means a ton of moisture onto my paper. I cut it out, and it curled a little bit. So to fix that curl, to flatten my paper, I'm adding a scrap die cut from the back. If you want, you can die cut a bunch of those and use them in place of foam adhesive. I will be using foam adhesive. I have some foam tape, dimensional tape, to pop these houses onto my card because I always love to add dimension to my projects. I love how a dimensional die cut casts a little bit of a shadow, and it just helps the project come to life. This does make your card a little bit harder to mail, but I never mind it. I like to have all of that beautiful dimension. So I'm adding double-sided foam tape from the back of my die cuts, and I'm going to foam mount them onto my card. As you can see, I blend my background so that I have a bit of that extra space in the center. So my two houses are going to go in between my two sentiments, in between my two vertical sentiments. By the way, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stamp the I wish you were my neighbor sentiment or heat emboss it. So I first stamped it onto my panel and then I cut it out using a skinny strip die. I'm using the Simon Says Stamp foam adhesive strips, going to add a strip of adhesive behind my heat embossed sentiment. By the way, I heat embossed it in detail white embossing powder, and I'm just going to assemble everything. So first, going to add the sentiment on the right-hand side of my panel. The bottom part of my yellow house lines up with the bottom part of my sentiment. And then the top part of my greenhouse fits right under the letter F. I really like how it nestles in there. I did practice this card on scrap paper before I made it because I wanted to make sure that everything would fit and everything would sort of nestle and, fit in place like a puzzle piece. So now I just have my die cut trees to add, and I'm once again using foam adhesive squares, although I am switching to the thin foam adhesive squares here, and then also adding the bicycle and the lantern, and my card is done. I love the way that this turned out. I had a blast creating with these stamps. I think they're brilliant. I think they can be used all year round. And I can already see myself using these houses for Christmas cards. You just add a little bit of Christmas greenery to them and you'll be done. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to create. I hope you are going to rush to your craft room, look through your supplies and create something similar or recreate this card if you already have these products. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.
I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.